On today's episode of More Tools Than Sense, we spend way too long making that piece run! Alright, so this truck's been sitting in my yard for about 5 years, but before that, it was sitting in his yard. But I needed to move it a little bit, and it ended up moving a lot, kind of rolled down the hill into the woods.
It wants to go off-road.
It does. Alright, here's what we got. We got a couple of days off work. I think we can get this truck out of the woods, step 1. Cleaned off with a pressure washer, step 2. In the garage, step 3. And then put a Cummins diesel in it, step 4.
Okay.
So what's around? Let's see this lovely piece.
It's mint.
It is.
Everything's perfect. The dash is like ready to eat. The seat is full of safety. We're good. Floor here's mostly there.
Get in here and get a closer look.
8-track. Still got the 8-track.
They look good.
So back in the 70s, Chrysler was going bankrupt for the first time, and the government decided to buy a bunch of Dodge trucks from them. That's what this is. 1976, it's an M888. So it's mostly just a civilian 3/4 ton pickup, but it has heavier springs. It's got like the 1 1/4 heavier springs on it. We might have to do something about that. It rides like a dump truck. It's got a Dana 60 in the rear, full floating, and in the front is some sort of Dana 44. I don't remember. And I'm hoping that holds up to the weight of that gigantic 6BT that we're going to put in there. Let's unbolt the brakes. I don't know if we need to keep any of these wires. Maybe. And I think it's like 6 bolts. The ghost of the brake fluid is in there. Bolts are loose. Let's raise her up. See if we can't drop it on ourselves. Monster truck height. Perfect. Ready? See if we can't drop it on ourselves.
Well, I am glad I moved. No, it's fine. We're good. Send it. So that's why it's a really good idea to use a ratchet strap whenever you have anything balanced, maybe a bit precariously on your lift. A while ago we boxed the frame in, But since then, it's been sitting outside. So there's a ton of rust on it. We're gonna try to knock some of that off. It's not my truck, I don't really care how much comes off. But it's his truck, so he got this stuff.
So we got a little undercoating, the Wool Wax USA. See how it does. Paint it up.
Let's do it.
Since we live on the East Coast, rust is a problem. They like to salt the roads here a lot. So in an effort to make this thing not turn into a pile of rust, we're going to put some of this sheep oil on there, wool wax. Came with this fancy gun to get on the inside of the frame so we can try and prevent it from having Toyota problems. It's got these extension wands to get in there since it's a box frame now. See what we can do.
Now that the frame has been all cleaned up and waxed, we are going to find all the parts for the drivetrain and start putting it together. Oh, did you want some help, or?
I got it!
Alright, so these are all the parts that have been in my garage, taking up space for around about 5 to 8 years. And I'm super happy that we're going to put them in Josh's truck and he's going to take them all home.
Now we got to take these bolts out.
Why?
I was going to torque down the transmission adapter back to the engine, but I forgot my torque wrench. And this guy's only got this crappy spring-loaded one. But the problem is this thing's been sitting in a drawer for who knows how long, tightened all the way down, and it is way off. So in order for us to try and figure out some semblance of torque, what we're going to do is hang the weights 1 foot to the end here and hope that it gets pretty close, at least closer than it would be, and then tighten this down until it clicks so we can reproduce it on the engine. Let's do it. Calibrated. What's it at?
50.
50. 50 for 30.
50, yeah. Not great.
I was putting the flex plate in, but it's got this giant crack that runs all the way through here. And apparently that's pretty common with these, especially with the modified ones, and this has at least bigger injectors in it. So I've got another one on order, but won't be able to get it for a couple of days. We'll go ahead and put this engine in the frame and see what else doesn't fit. See if we can get the transmission mounts and things like that before it gets here.
Alright, so last night I pulled the adapter plate off. It had one bolt that just wouldn't come out. The welder didn't do the trick. So I had to put it on the mill and drill it out and then kind of chase all the old bolt out with a tap. Today we're looking to get the whole drivetrain bolted together, and then we can start fitting it into the frame and see what we need.
So we weren't sure if we were going to get the cross member from the major or from the donor truck. But we were able to cobble some pieces together, and I found these engine mounts. I don't know what they go to because they don't seem like they go to either truck, but they do work. So we're going to see if we can slap this together and at least get our alignment correct between these parts, those parts, that part, and those parts.
Alright, so we're putting the transmission cross brace in, but the bolts don't quite line up. The frame may be warped, we're not 100% sure, but we're going to do it the quick and dirty way, and we're just going to put this screw jack in there to open the frame up that ½ inch or so that we need. Don't have the correct attachment for this screw jack though, so I've got to make one out of a piece of angle iron for full redneck engineering.
This is a transmission cooler. The bolts broke on it trying to get it apart. So in order to fix it, it's got this funny little clamp that wraps around here, and we're gonna put a piece through here, tap a hole into it, and then we can just screw it in.
While the cab is up here on the lift and off of the frame, there's a little bit of rust repair I want to do. There's some sections here that are pretty bad. The fenders, I have replacements for those, so we don't have to worry about that. But there are a couple of sections underneath that I want to get at least straightened up a little bit before we put it back together. Alright, so we ran into some trouble, and I've taken the transmission off, put it back on again a couple of times trying to figure it out. The torque converter is seated all the way down inside the transmission, but there's still not enough clearance between it and the flex plate. After doing some research, we found that using the thicker flex plate that we got may cause an issue where you need to use a spacer between the bell housing and the engine. Well, didn't feel like buying one of those, so I guess I'm going to have to make one. Alright, so I got the spacer finished. I had some 1/8 inch aluminum sitting around, so I drilled some holes, and then you can actually use Sharpie markers. They're the perfect size to be locator dowels and allow you to align the holes and then trim the edges of the aluminum. Turned out pretty well, I think. I made it 3 separate pieces so that I could make it out of smaller chunks of aluminum and save on material. Well, now that we've installed the spacer, that pushes the transmission mount back even further. So those holes that we bored out are too close to the edge, and we're going to have to add some extra metal to that. Time to break out the big TIG. Okay, so this is the wrong yoke. Doesn't fit the drive shaft that we have on this truck. However, I found the correct yoke. It was on the rear end that we had sitting in the back of the garage. I pulled that off. However, all the bolts are broken off inside of it. Now, if I can buy a tool instead of a part, I'll pretty much always buy that tool. So I went off and I bought an oxyacetylene torch instead of a new yoke. Hopefully that gamble is going to pay off and those bolts will come right out of it. that the engine and transmission are actually installed in the frame of the truck, we can start focusing on a whole bunch of other little things like brakes, brake lines, and all these cooling lines as well.
I need more wrenches.
Yes, you have every wrench that we have.
I don't. I need more wrenches. Finally got this thing buttoned up. We've got the mess of the transfer case that was egged out like a goose egg fixed and welded back together. We've got the kickdown cable mess hopefully put back together. I couldn't find another one, so we MacGyvered some stuff with some hose clamps. We're going to use the same crappy 45-year-old body mounts on this thing because we're going to make this thing run today. Let's put this thing together.
So even though we didn't get all the electronics hooked up yet and we don't have a key or starter or anything, we try to jump the engine just to make sure everything's running. The starter would just spin freely, doesn't seem to be engaging, so we're pretty sure that the gear is stuck and not able to pop out. So hopefully we're going to be able to pull the starter apart and break it loose. So to be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing when I took this starter apart, but they're pretty simple beasts. This is where the motor engages and it spins it, and then as the weight spins, this internal weight sort of pushes and it slides itself up. All we had to do is I held it in my hand and really lightly tapped it with a hammer and it broke free. Before we took it apart, we couldn't get this to move, and now it seems to move freely, so feeling pretty good about it. I think it's going to work. We have smoke. Well, as expected, this took much longer than expected. We were most of the way through fixing it. We had it running, and then I had to move, so we had to move the truck over here. And then also there was that whole global pandemic, which kind of slowed us down.
And since I didn't have any help putting the truck together all by myself, I had to take the bed off by myself to get the fuel pickup fixed, and then I had to fix the fuel pickup with beer line fittings. It took a little longer than really I would have liked. And rebuild the turbo too. It was a little tough for me.
But we finally got everything thrown back together. We got the seats in, threw a crappy radiator in there, and it runs and drives, and it's actually not too terrible.
It's okay.
It's okay! All right, now that we've reached rolling restoration status, we can actually start fixing some of the smaller stuff. What do you think we should get started on first?
Springs, axles, rock rails, big tires, maybe a key to start it instead of a little yellow wire, but I don't want to get too greedy.
Yeah.
New bed, new floors, new seat.
All right, well, we'll do our best. to knock
Lights.
all that stuff out. Lights, yeah, and make it, hopefully it'll even be roadworthy, and we can take this someplace. Maybe to that off-road park up at PA.
Maybe.
I think that'd be a good place to take it.
I'm gonna take camping.
Yeah, let's get it going. We'll see that in another episode. Hopefully, we'll get all that stuff done.